Rick Rude's shocking death wasn't just tragic, it was mysterious, sudden, and filled with unanswered questions. A man once admired for his sculpted physique and cocky swagger was gone far too soon. But how did it really happen? And what was the untold story behind the accident that took him from this world? To understand the bizarre circumstances surrounding his death, we have to go back to the final chapter of Rick Rude's life, a time when he was no longer dazzling fans in the ring, but instead battling pain, regret, and whispers of a comeback. On April 20th, 1999, the wrestling world was hit with a jolt. Rick Rude, real name Richard Irwin Rude, was found dead in his home in Alpharetta, Georgia. He was only 40 years old. The cause? A heart attack. But beneath that simple explanation lay a deeper, more complicated truth. Toxicology reports revealed a lethal mix of prescription drugs, painkillers, muscle relaxers, steroids. Many believe it wasn't just an accident, it was the final breaking point of a body that had been pushed beyond its limit. You see, Rick Rude had been preparing for a comeback. After suffering a serious back injury in 1994 that forced him into early retirement, he had been healing, training, and even negotiating a return to the ring. He wanted to wrestle again. But he was also reportedly using performance-enhancing drugs to get back into his old shape. His body, already worn down from years of punishment, couldn't take it anymore. Some who were close to him say he was in tremendous pain in the final months of his life. Others say he looked fine, like the old ravishing Rick. But in truth, he was fighting a war inside, physically and emotionally. But Rick Rude's story isn't just about a tragic end. His career was filled with bold moves, controversies, and clashes with wrestling's biggest names. And to truly understand why his death struck such a deep chord, you have to understand the man behind the mustache. Rude wasn't just another flashy character in spandex. He was a no-nonsense guy in a wild industry. He didn't kiss up to promoters. He didn't play politics backstage. And that led to some serious drama. One of the biggest controversies of his career came in 1997, when he appeared on 2 wrestling shows on the same night. That's right, Rick Rude made history by showing up on WWF's Raw and WCW's Nitro on the very same Monday night, during the height of the Monday Night Wars. One was live, one was taped, and fans were left speechless. It was a bold move, a middle finger to Vince McMahon after Rude felt betrayed by the infamous Montreal Screwjob. He had been a loyal member of D-Generation X, but after seeing how Bret Hart was treated, he walked away. No hesitation, no warning. That was Rick Rude, always standing by what he believed in, even if it cost him everything. But beneath all the confidence and rebellion was a man quietly breaking down. Years of wear and tear had caught up to him. Back in 1994, Rude suffered a devastating back injury during a match in Japan. It wasn't a flashy moment. There was no dramatic collapse or ambulance, but something cracked inside him, literally. Doctors told him he had to retire. Not should, had to. His spine simply couldn't take the pressure anymore. For someone like Rick Rude, that news felt like a prison sentence. Wrestling wasn't just a job. It was his identity. He wasn't ready to walk away. So even after retiring from active competition, Rude stayed close to the business. He took on roles that kept him on TV, like managing, commentating, or just being a tough presence at ringside. He became a key figure in groups like D-Generation X and later the New World Order in WCW. Fans still saw him on screen, still heard his voice, still felt his presence. But for Rick, none of it replaced being in the ring. And deep down, he wanted to wrestle again. That's where things took a dangerous turn. By the late 1990s, rumors began swirling that Rude was training for a return. He was only in his late 30s, still young by wrestling standards. He had reportedly begun working out intensely and using steroids to rebuild the body he was once famous for. He wanted to look like ravishing Rick Rude again. The goal wasn't just about looks. It was about proving something to himself. But he was also battling constant pain. To manage it, he was taking multiple medications, painkillers, muscle relaxants, and other prescriptions. The mix of these drugs with steroids created a dangerous cocktail that slowly damaged his body, especially his heart. Those around him noticed changes. Some said he looked strong again. Others said he seemed distant, even tired. Moreover, Rude's career was filled with controversy, even behind the scenes. He was never one to play the political game. If he had a problem with management, he'd speak up directly. That didn't always go over well in a business built on ego and backstage alliances. In 1992, he had a serious falling out with Vince McMahon. One issue was money. Rude felt he wasn't being paid what he was worth. Another issue involved creative direction. He wanted better stories, better matches, and more respect. When those things didn't come, he left the company. After suffering his career-ending injury in Japan, Rude didn't go quietly. He filed a lawsuit against Lloyd's of London, the insurance company covering wrestlers who suffered permanent injuries. The policy was supposed to help injured wrestlers financially after forced retirement. Rude's claim was part of a growing trend of wrestlers taking legal action just to stay afloat. Ironically, the same insurance policy that gave him financial security also kept him from wrestling again. If he returned to the ring, he'd lose the payout. So he was stuck, wanting to wrestle, but legally blocked from doing so unless he paid the money back. That's part of what made his situation so frustrating and sad. On screen, Rick Rude was all bravado, stripping off his robe, flexing his muscles, and insulting local crowds in every town. He'd call the men sweat hogs and tell the women to keep their eyes on a real man. It was classic heel work. Fans hated him, but they loved to hate him. Off-screen, though, Rude was surprisingly quiet. He valued privacy. He had a wife, kids, and lived far from the spotlight. Friends said he didn't party much. He wasn't into wild road stories or late-night chaos like many wrestlers from that era. In fact, he often skipped the after-show hangouts just to get home to his family. But even that life was affected by the toll wrestling had taken. Chronic pain, mental stress, and the constant pressure to look like the old Rude stayed with him. He may have been private, but he wasn't immune. The sad truth is, Rick Rude's death followed a heartbreaking pattern in pro wrestling. The 80s and 90s were full of stars who died young, due to drugs, health issues, or simply from pushing their bodies beyond the limit. Mr. Perfect, Owen Hart, the British Bulldog, Eddie Guerrero, and the list goes on. Rude's name is often grouped with those stories, but his case was a bit different. His death wasn't public. It wasn't part of a scandal or high-speed chase. It happened quietly, at home, while he was trying to come back. That's what makes it so haunting. He was trying to rebuild and didn't make it in time. Years later, fans still talk about Rick Rude with respect. He wasn't the loudest guy in the locker room, but he was one of the best. He could wrestle with anyone. He had a natural charisma that didn't feel forced. And unlike many others, he protected his character. He never broke kayfabe, even when cameras weren't rolling. In 2017, WWE finally honored him with an induction into the Hall of Fame. His family was there. Fans gave him a long, standing ovation. The stories shared that night weren't just about his muscles or arrogance. They were about his work ethic, his loyalty, and the impact he made in such a short time. If Rick Rude's story hit you like it hit us, quietly powerful and painfully real, then don't let it fade. Hit that like button to keep his legacy alive, and subscribe for more untold stories from the world behind the curtain. And if you've ever wondered what really happens to the heroes of our childhood when the lights go out, stick around. We've got more truths coming your way. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again very soon.